Archaeologists have recreated Cleopatra's perfume and explored the ruins of the most shocking site on the planet. Here are some of the most amazing recent discoveries. Kahane Tepe. At the site of Kahane Tepe, archaeologists found a human statue with a realistic facial expression. It's been hailed as an amazing discovery since it's one of the oldest statues of its kind in the world. You've likely heard of Gobek Tepe before, an ancient site that's considered to be the oldest religious sanctuary in the world. Gobek Tepe is at least 12,000 years old, but its origin is a total mystery. Some think it was the real Garden of Eden where the first man and woman on Earth lived. Mainstream archaeologists don't even have a good theory because it's so beyond the scope of mainstream scientific thinking. The ruins are 6,000 years older than the great cities of Mesopotamia, and amazingly, it was built during the Ice Age. Maybe Gobek Tepe wouldn't be quite as impressive if it weren't for the statues and stonework. The sophistication of the buildings and monuments didn't appear anywhere else on Earth for another 6 millennia. Gobek Tepe is amazing and baffling, and so is its sister site of Kahane Tepe. It's the same age, located just a couple miles away in the same region of Turkey. Kahane Tepe is further evidence that everything scientists say about the creation of human settlements is wrong. Human society started much earlier than previously believed, likely right here in Turkey. The site has been around for a long time. It was first identified in 1997 and has been studied continuously ever since. The hypothesis among those who have seen the city with their own eyes is that it represents a 0 point in history. It's the starting line for the beginning of human civilization. Some even think that it predates Gobek Tepe, but the dating for both sites has been tough to get perfectly straight. The newly discovered statue is totally unique. It's one of the earliest, if not the oldest, stone statue of a person with a distinct facial expression. It's also not the only statue in the area. Archaeologists identified an intricately carved sculpture of a vulture. More and more, archaeologists are revealing the incredible stonework of whoever built Kahane Tepe. One thing you need to consider is that based on the incredible skill it took to build these monuments, they weren't the first. These were done with the kind of expert precision you'd expect to see in Rome or Egypt. These statues aren't a civilization's first attempt at creating sculptures. They're simply too perfect and too detailed. And now for number 8. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Apakatsuki and Blender Study. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. You guys are the best. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. Cleopatra's perfume. Archaeologists have been hard at work trying to recreate ancient Egyptian scents through hieroglyphic recipes. And it's proved a lot more difficult than anyone anticipated. In ancient Egypt, perfume makers were incredibly important people. They mixed substances like myrrh, tree bark, juniper berries, and grass, all different kinds of natural ingredients. Their concoctions resulted in very potent ointments, which would be used for medicinal purposes. And more often than not, these ingredients were turned into perfumes. This was going on at least 5,100 years ago. Hieroglyphic recipes for perfumes exist that are even older than the pyramids and the Sphinx. In 2009, archaeologists excavated the ancient city of Thamuis. They found all kinds of different things, including the ruins of an ancient fragrance factory. They found clay perfume containers and kilns that were used 2,300 years ago. The factory would have been fully functional around the time that Alexander the Great founded the city of Alexandria. The fragrance factory was a huge deal for Sean Coughlin of the Czech Academy of Sciences in Prague. He and his colleagues have been trying to recreate a particular Egyptian fragrance known only as the Mendician perfume. It was used by Cleopatra when she reigned as the last Egyptian queen between 51 and 30 BC. The perfume was likely named after the city where it was invented. Mendes, the lost city of Thamuis, where the perfume factory was discovered, was an extension of Mendes. It was very likely that the legendary perfume worn by Cleopatra was produced in this very factory. Using ancient writings and the discoveries at the mummies, Sean and his team were able to produce a scent that they think encapsulates the Mendesian perfume. They used pine resin, desert date oil, cinnamon, and myrrh. The combination resulted in a strong but pleasant smell, a little spicy but a little sweet. Researchers believe that this was likely the smell that Cleopatra left in her wake as she moved through the halls of her palace in Alexandria. The man in boots. In the midst of a construction project in London, archaeologists found the skeleton of a man from 500 years ago. He was found still wearing his unusual thigh-high leather boots. The discovery was made during London's enormous sewer project. The Thames Tideway Tunnel is an endeavor to stop London's sewer system from overflowing and getting into the Thames River. The construction project is scheduled for completion in the year 2024. Given the excavation of a 15-mile tunnel, there were initial expectations of unearthing some archaeological treasures. However, the unexpected discovery of the person with the boots has surpassed everyone's wildest imaginations. Beth Richardson is one of the main researchers who studied the mysterious man and his boots. And she said that just by analyzing his boots, researchers were able to learn a lot about what his life was like 5 centuries ago. His boots were custom-made. They were reinforced with extra soles and were stuffed with a kind of mossy material. This may have been for comfort or to make them warmer. The footwear indicates that he likely lived a life on the water. The boots were exceptionally high quality and would have kept his feet dry. When researchers checked his teeth, they found grooves likely caused by repetitive action. He may have been passing ropes through his teeth, reinforcing the idea that he was a sailor or a fisherman. The evidence points to a sailor who got stuck in the mud of the river and died. This happened either at the end of the 15th century or the beginning of the 16th century. Because he was still found wearing his boots, it's highly likely that his death was an accident. His skeleton was found face down, with his arms thrown over his head. Researchers think he tripped, landed in the mud, and then drowned, and he's been laying in the muck ever since. Dracula's cannonballs. Cannonballs used in battle by the most notorious vampire warlord of the 15th century have been discovered in Bulgaria. Yes, these are Dracula's very real cannonballs. The amazing discovery was made in the small town of Zvistov, which has a population of around 37,000. Professor Nikolai Ovcharov and his team from the National Institute and Museum of Archaeology were behind the find. They say the cannonballs came from culverins, a much earlier form of the standard cannon that came later. The small medieval cannonballs were fired by none other than Vlad Dracula III himself, also known as Vlad the Impaler. In the middle of the 15th century, Vlad was fighting constantly against the Ottomans, and one of the most epic battles took place in 1461, when the Wallachian warlord laid siege to Zistova fortress. Vlad successfully conquered the fortress, claiming it for his own. Historians don't know how long he stayed there, but he lived in the fortress for quite some time. There's a preserved letter sent from Vlad Dracula to the King of Hungary, and in the letter, Vlad brags about how he killed 410 Turks while taking the fortress. Researchers think that many of them were likely impaled in the traditional Dracula style. Stoneman Willie. 128 years ago, a man died in a Pennsylvania jail, and his accidental mummy has been on display at a funeral home ever since. But only now has his identity finally been discovered. Ever since 1895, the mummified prisoner has been called Stoneman Willie. According to Aumann's funeral home in Reading, he was mummified by accident when a mortician experimented with a new embalming technique. The mortician accidentally became an ancient Egyptian embalmer, creating a perfect mummy. The preserved corpse was then put on display, and nobody ever bothered to take it down. The reason nobody knew Stoneman Willie's real identity was his own fault. When he was arrested at the end of the 19th century, he gave a fake name. He was caught pickpocketing, lied about who he was, and was thrown in jail. Because he was an alcoholic, he quickly died of kidney failure. So, after his body was taken to the funeral home, he seemed like a good candidate for the mortician's new experiment. In 2023, funeral director Kyle Blankenbiller finally uncovered the truth of Stoneman Willie. Kyle looked through historical records until he was able to identify the mummy as James Murphy. Once the funeral home learned his name, they decided that he deserved a proper burial. So in October, James Murphy was given a funeral and was finally put in the ground. His burial came 13 decades late, but better late than never, right? The mysterious sarcophagus. At an ancient necropolis in France, scientists just found the remains of a woman from 1,800 years ago. But her body is currently trapped inside a humongous stone sarcophagus. It's extremely rare for archaeologists these days to find unlooted tombs. So right away, this discovery was a big deal. Archaeologists uncovered the Roman sarcophagus in northeastern France, completely intact. The woman in the stone box has been lying in complete darkness, crowded by her grave goods since the 2nd century AD. Whoever she was, researchers think she must have been very important. Let me explain to you why. Her sarcophagus is immense. It wasn't just a hollowed-out piece of limestone. It was a huge coffin sealed shut with 8 iron clasps. It's very rare that such an ancient coffin was sealed using iron fixings. The stone lid by itself weighs 1,700 pounds. This woman was buried and nobody had any intention of letting her out. The sarcophagus hasn't been opened yet. Scientists used X-rays to peek inside, then inserted an endoscopic camera. They found the woman's skeleton and some grave goods such as oil lamps and accessories like a small mirror, a comb, and a ring. The woman was likely about 40 when she died, but who she was is the real mystery. To have been given such a remarkable burial, she must have been an elite member of society, or maybe she was a ruler. Unfortunately, nobody knows for sure. Buried coins. In a small ancient town in the north of Wales, 2 sets of coins were recently discovered. A couple of metal detectors found a hoard of almost 3,000 coins from very, very far away. The town in which the discovery was made is called Kahane, a beautiful place that's been inhabited for thousands of years. David Moss and Tom Taylor were wandering around with metal detectors when their machine started beeping. They poked around in the ground and came across a ceramic vessel. Inside the vessel were 2,733 coins. Just think about how exciting that would be. According to a museum, there were 2 different kinds of coins. The silver denarii were minted between 32 BC and 235 AD, and the Antoniani copper alloy coins were minted between 215 and 270 AD. The metal detectors also found a secondary hoard, but it only had 37 coins. It was the ceramic vessel that archaeologists were really excited about. When they emptied the coins meticulously one by one, they found something unusual. The older coins were on the bottom and the newer coins were on the top. That wouldn't be so weird if they weren't separated by 300 years. Somebody had been collecting coins in a pot for 3 centuries. So just what in the world is going on here? Was there a vampire gradually building a fortune for 300 years? Was it a family continuously putting away coins for some unforeseen event in the distant future? It really is a weird mystery, and one with a tragic end. Whoever was collecting all these coins never got to spend them. The boat coffins. In the year 2000, a handful of coffins carved into the shapes of boats were found at a site in China's Chengdu city. The coffins were in a mysterious royal tomb dating to the kingdom of Shu, which dominated China 2,400 years ago. Since then, hundreds of boat-shaped coffins have been found, and archaeologists are absolutely shocked. The first tomb that was found in 2000 turned out to contain 17 boat-shaped coffins, and the biggest of them all was positively enormous. It stretched 60 feet long and was full to the brim with artifacts. It was a coffin big enough to fit a sea monster, or hundreds of ordinary bodies. Then, 17 years later, researchers found another site in the village of Shuangyuan, which is located just outside Chengdu. The site contained 200 tombs with boat-shaped coffins, and the year after, 60 identical coffins were found in the village of Woodhenge County in Sichuan province. These tombs were also filled with treasures, weapons, and beautiful pearls. Unfortunately, though, scientists don't know what to think of all these burials. Nobody knows why the tombs were made to look like boats. But then again, nobody knows much about the ancient Shu culture at all. A city destroyed by war. A team of scientists have discovered an unknown Roman city from 2,000 years ago in Spain. The city is such a mystery that archaeologists don't even know its name. The Romans built their mystery city on the banks of the Ebro River at the end of the 2nd century BC. This was before the creation of the Roman Empire, so it would have been established during the Roman Republic, when they were still struggling for domination of Italy and Spain. Based on the few foundations that archaeologists have uncovered, the city was likely established as a military camp, but it didn't exist for very long. This city appears to have been destroyed by a war that was waged only a few years after the city was founded. Its destruction coincided with the devastating conflict known as the Sertorian War of the 1st century BC. It was a war between the government in Rome and the rebels on the Iberian Peninsula. The rebels weren't particularly happy about being conquered by Roman tyrants. So, from 80 until 72 BC, the Sertorians fought against the power of Rome. They consisted of Roman and Italian rebels, along with Celts and local Iberians. We all know how the war ended, with Rome being victorious and taking over all within their reach. This city on the river was likely destroyed during the violence. Researchers said that they found a lot of fire damage, which is evidence that the city was burned to the ground. And they think additional excavations will likely reveal mass graves. Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Valley of the Golden Mummies. The Valley of the Golden Mummies is an incredible burial site that was found in the Bahariya Oasis, which is in Egypt's western desert. Egyptologist Zahi Hawass and his team have uncovered approximately 250 mummies so far. But this is just the beginning, because it's estimated that there are at least 10,000 mummies buried here along with their treasures, artifacts, and secrets. The mummies found here date back to the Greco-Roman period about 2,000 years ago. Aware of the historic nature of the area, they called in archaeologists to supervise the dig. And that was when they uncovered the crumbling walls of a place where the locals used to come and celebrate. They also found a bit of brandy and the foundations of some old houses. As if all of this weren't amazing enough, the bottles of brandy were still fully sealed and never touched. The pub was known as the Astley Arms Pub, and during excavations, the archaeologists found pieces of pottery that they were able to trace back to the landlord of the pub in 1821, a man by the name of Thomas Evans. The archaeological supervisor even worked to track down the family history of the landlord, discovering that Evans still has a distant relative living in Texas. However, it's not clear whether the descendant will be getting a free bottle of brandy or if it will be put in the local museum with pieces of pottery also found at the site. Woodhenge. A wooden version of Stonehenge has been discovered by archaeologists in Yorkshire. This circular monument is exceptionally rare, 4,000 years old, and is now being called Woodhenge. Archaeologists were alerted to the possibility of something amazing when aerial photos of crop patterns showed them something unusual in the middle of nowhere. There was a circular monument hidden underneath a quarry near the coastal town of Hornsea, probably built either in the early part of the Bronze Age or before that in the later part of the Neolithic. When archaeologists went to investigate the mysterious monuments that they saw in the photos, they discovered wooden posts, a circular ditch, and two entrances to what was once a giant monument. It looks almost exactly like Stonehenge. At least it would have thousands of years ago, only made from wood instead of stone. But unlike Stonehenge, this wooden construct may have been used for rest and relaxation. It may have had nothing to do with rituals or ceremonies, and nothing to do with astrology or the equinoxes. John Tibbles, the leading archaeologist on the project, said that the monument may have been used as a sauna. Hot stones may have been dumped in a pit in the middle of the circle, with water poured on them which created steam. The old prehistoric people of England then could have sat around and had a nice steam with one another. But there is one other theory as well. Archaeologists also say that Woodhenge could have been used for ritual cremation, with groups meeting and then burning their dead in the center of the structure. What do you think it was for? Let me know in the comments below. Crab brain. In a world first, researchers have managed to discover a fossilized brain over 300 million years old. The brain they uncovered was from a horseshoe crab. The reason this is such a wild discovery is that normally only things like bones and shells are found fossilized. Soft and squishy tissues like brains and skin and organs decay and don't fossilize very well. Yet 310 million years before today, the conditions were perfect at what is now Mason Creek, Illinois, for this one horseshoe crab to be fossilized, including its hard shell and brain. Despite their name, horseshoe crabs are not really crabs. They are more closely related to spiders and scorpions than they are to crustaceans. They evolved as arachnids about 400 million years ago. The most amazing part of the discovery of the brain was not the brain itself, but the fact that scientists found it almost identical to the brains of modern horseshoe crabs. Even though the specimen is so old, it seems the brain of the creature has evolved very little throughout all that time. Researcher Russell Bicknell told Life Science that even though the horseshoe crab has evolved its body, almost nothing inside of it has changed from the time they first emerged on the planet. Prehistoric rock structures. Mysterious rock structures have been found underneath the Great Lakes, leaving scientists a little confused. The underwater archaeologist Mark Hawley was actually looking for shipwrecks back in 2007 on the bottom of Lake Michigan, when he instead stumbled upon a weird formation of stones. These stones were probably left behind by ancient humans who created some kind of massive monument. One of the giant stones even appeared to have the intricate carving of a mastodon. And since mastodons went extinct 10,500 years ago, we know the carving has to be at least a little older than that. After the mysterious rock structures of Lake Michigan were found, even more curious ancient artifacts were found just down the road in Lake Huron. A piece of lake bed roughly the size of a football field was excavated by archaeologists, who discovered dozens of pieces of stone structures that date back around 9,000 years. Scientists don't know if both collections of structures were built by the same people, but it is highly likely. Anthropology professor John O'Shea says the structures inside the lakes are similar to those in Roman Pompeii, because the cold, fresh water has kept them perfectly preserved. The truly amazing part is that at the time these monuments were built, much of North America was still covered in glacial ice sheets. Water levels were extremely low, with the Great Lakes themselves about 300 feet shallower than they are today. This is why the ancient people here were able to build monuments inside the lakes. They probably built a lot more above ground, but the ones preserved by the frigid water were the only examples that survived. Ancient fingerprint. A very old fingerprint was found by Danish archaeologists doing a brief survey ahead of construction for an underwater tunnel designed to connect the small German island of Fehmarn to the small Danish island of Lolland. The archaeologists first found a ceramic vessel dating back 5,500 years. They were then shocked to see that the vessel still had the artisan's fingerprint on it, like the oldest signature ever. The vessel itself comes from the funnel beaker culture, a group of early people who lived in Europe from between 4000 and 2800 BC. They made pottery and were the first farmers to prosper throughout the North European plains, including much of Scandinavia. Back when the piece of pottery was made, it had probably contained food or liquid, but for whatever reason had gotten lost and buried in the dirt. The fingerprint may have been left on the vessel while it was being manufactured. A total accident. Lena Marie Olsen from the local museum in Denmark called it an anonymous but very personal signature, which has incidentally brought modern researchers a bit closer to the prehistoric people and their way of life. And now it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Candace Perry and DJ Chark for supporting Origins Explained. If you'd like to see more videos about strange discoveries, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go. Mummy virus. The new study of viral DNA extracted from a child mummy from the 17th century has revealed an ancient and deadly form of smallpox. To understand this discovery a bit better, we need to go back to ancient Egypt. Rashes have been found on the faces of Egyptian mummies that were buried 3,000 years ago. Smallpox has been around for a very long time, and that includes plaguing the ancient Egyptians. But the deadliest form of the disease, according to this new virus sample, emerged much later, right around the time that people in Europe were colonizing the New World. The discovery of the smallpox virus was an accident. Lithuanian researchers were trying to gather DNA to find out more about the mummified remains of the young kid who was found in a crypt in Vilnius. Samples were sent to a lab in Canada, and scientists found evidence of the smallpox virus. They quickly mapped its genome, which was the first time this was done with a virus this old, and they made the discovery. Even more impressive is that the scientists were able to trace the evolution of the virus back to around 1530. Scientists now believe the deadly strain of smallpox had been alive and well in animals and then jumped to humans at around this time thanks to a mutation that made it deadlier. This just goes to show that throughout our history, animals have turned seemingly harmless viruses into deadly strains of killer disease. Irish Bog Body. The mummified corpse found in a bog in Ireland was found just a couple of years ago and dated back to 2000 BC. According to archaeologists, that makes it the oldest bog body found anywhere in the world. It's 4,000 years old, predating the Egyptian king Tutankhamun by 700 years. Researchers don't know much about this mysterious bog body, but they do say that based on marks left over on his preserved flesh, he met an extremely violent death in some sort of weird ritual. The corpse in the bog was found by a construction worker. It was also found with part of a wooden stake, suggesting the man had been tied down at the time of his killing. His body showed that he had had his arms broken, his back slashed open with a knife, and possibly much more. Unfortunately, the construction worker had accidentally damaged the body's head and neck and chest as he was working, so not much more was found. To make the discovery even crazier, the experts are saying that this person was probably a king. This is based on evidence of other bog bodies found in the area. Irish bog bodies are typically found with a lack of calluses on their hands and groomed fingernails, suggesting they were of some high standing in society. Archaeologists say they were in fact kings who failed their people and were killed as part of a ritual sacrifice for their shortcomings. Neolithic Portal. A Neolithic portal dolmen has been excavated in Wales. It's known locally as the Trefail Stone, and experts say it was probably the capstone used for an ancient burial chamber from the Stone Age. We have known about the stone for quite some time. However, the locals in Pembrokeshire always thought it was just some boring old rock that may or may not have been related to prehistoric people. It wasn't until just recently that archaeologists investigated the stone and realized that it was part of a ritual burial from about 5,500 years ago. A team of professionals from the University of Bristol then went in and excavated human bones from beneath the stone. It's now considered to be the oldest Neolithic burial ever found in Wales, and one of the oldest in Western Europe. But the burial chamber wasn't used just once. It was probably established as a stone burial chamber built from huge boulders around 3,500 BC. But then the dolmen was dismantled 1,500 years later, and the capstone was used to mark the point of a different burial site. In fact, experts say the location may have been used for burials even during the Mesolithic period, 10,000 years ago. If true, this could be one of the longest-lasting burial sites anywhere in Europe. The Great Library of Alexandria. For a very long time, experts have believed that the Great Library of Alexandria, once the center for knowledge and learning in the entire ancient world, was destroyed by fire. A new study shows that the greatest library ever built may have actually been destroyed because of government budget cuts. Alexander the Great formed the city of Alexandria in Egypt in 331 BC, but it was Ptolemy II who ruled the city after Alexander left. He wanted something that would attract great scholars from all around the world to his city. Instead of just being a place occupied by rich Greeks, it would be a city of learning. So the Library of Alexandria was born in 283 BC. It was packed with thousands of scrolls, and academics from all over the known world made pilgrimage here to learn, give lectures, and consult the infinite texts. At one point, there were even 100 of the greatest scholars in the world living in the library and working full-time to take care of the immense amount of knowledge. By the year 40 AD, Cleopatra was the one ruling Egypt and Alexandria. History would have us believe that Julius Caesar attacked Alexandria and burned down the library. But experts haven't actually found evidence that this happened. Instead, it's believed that when the government began cutting the budget for the library, it began to degrade on its own. The library declined over time. Scholars stopped visiting it, and by around the year 639, when Arab troops conquered the city, it was dead to history. Thanks for watching! Which of these incredible discoveries is your favorite? What do you want to learn more about? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time!